Good evening, everyone. Severe Weather Team 9 meteorologist Nathan Schutt. We are joined live for this edition of Nate at 8 with our weather intern this summer, Rachel Grant. And, just wanted to start off this edition of Nate at 8, both of us saying, our thoughts and prayers are with those that were impacted by the, no other way to put it, historic and horrendous, just awful flooding in Ohio County for this past weekend. And I know we dealt with flooding really across a lot of locations south of I-70. And the unfortunate news is that we can still deal with more flooding as we do look ahead over the next few days. So that's certainly we're going to be diving into with this edition of Nate at 8. We're going to be tracking some more rounds of precipitation coming our way. And yes, unfortunately, that potential for some more flooding as well as severe weather is going to be there. So we're going to track more of those showers and thunderstorms, the severe flooding potential, and then some better news in terms of the more dry, warmer weather ahead. So certainly looking forward to that.
Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing our first heat wave coming this weekend. It's a good timing, I guess, for the first day of summer. Also happening on Friday.
Yeah, really. Yeah, the official start to summer. And then, like you mentioned, it ramps up quick, doesn't it? Yeah, suddenly summer in that regard, that's for sure, as those temperatures really ramp up. Austin joining us this evening, saying good evening to both of us. I want to give hope and prayers to the family members and friends that lost their loved ones during this weekend. Yes, extreme heartbreaking event. I don't think there's any other way to put it. That's well put, Austin. Heartbreaking for sure. It was horrible to see occurring in Ohio County. And yes, thoughts and prayers, and certainly thinking of those that have been deeply impacted by that flooding in Ohio County. So for this, coming up this edition of Nate at 8, again, we are fortunately going to be tracking more of those showers and thunderstorms, and yes, the potential for more severe and flooding as well. So when we dive into things, I'm currently looking at radar. Thankfully, for today, not dealing with much precipitation at all present into our area. So certainly good with that. A lot of cloud cover keeping the majority of that precipitation at bay. Really the one area to watch for this evening would be for locations south of I-70 that saw a little more clearing, a little more sunshine throughout the latter part of this afternoon. That's where we're seeing those thunderstorms develop right now into Muskingum County. So we can still spot a few showers and a thunderstorm overnight. That being said, the coverage is very hit or miss. I think the severe potential tonight is low. I don't think it's zero, but I do think it's low. We'll still have to watch for situations like what we're seeing in Muskingum County. You may notice that here over the past hour, there is slow progression in those showers and thunderstorms over Muskingum County. So we still unfortunately have to watch for that as we go through the night. And another thing we'll have to likely watch for, Rachel, as we go into tomorrow morning will be some of that fog as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing the temperature and dew point level temperatures really cross paths. So we're seeing a lot of fog for tomorrow morning. So you have that early time commute between like 6:30, 7 especially, 7:30. You'll be seeing a lot of fog coming through there with reduced visibility. So just be careful while you're on the roadways tomorrow morning. If you have that later wake-up call, 8:30, 9 a.m., you should be good to go with no visibility issues whatsoever.
Yeah, let's see some of that fog give way likely to an increase in coverage of some showers and thunderstorms in as we go throughout the course of our day on Tuesday. And the good news is likely by tomorrow, we're going to notice much faster storm progression. So we're likely not going to get a repeat from what we had from this past weekend in terms of that slow progression, because we have those thunderstorms, they developed and they essentially just remained over the same location. And thankfully, we're not anticipating that for tomorrow. Now, that being said, what we can see still is some rounds of heavy rain over the same location. So while these storms aren't remaining over the same location for a long period of time, it's the fact that you can get that thunderstorm and then behind it, another thunderstorm, and then behind it, another thunderstorm. So you get a training effect of these thunderstorms, and that is what could yield that potential for flooding, unfortunately, again for Tuesday. And we'll see scattered showers and thunderstorms. We'll see primarily to the afternoon and evening likely will be that greatest potential for that potential for localized flooding again going into the latter part of Tuesdays. We could have some showers around for the morning, but we'll likely notice those thunderstorms further increase in coverage into the afternoon and evening, and that's where we could deal with that greatest potential then, unfortunately, for if we're dealing with flooding again tomorrow, the greatest potential will likely occur into the afternoon and evening. Austin says today got a lot hotter later on in the evening, probably when we saw some of that more of that sunshine break out. Austin, I went for a walk to get a nice icy cold treat. There we go.
Okay.
I'm excited to see the muggy meter going down later on this week. It is going down at least some, but we'll see when those temps pick back up. I'm worried it's going to go back up. And Joshua Grant. Do you know a Joshua Grant, Rachel?
I do.
Joshua Grant is saying hello from Delaware.
Hello.
And Joe is saying good evening to you as well, Joe. Thank you all for tuning in to this edition of Nate at 8. So we'll likely spot some showers and thunderstorms in continuing for Tuesday night, but at this point I think coverage is going to start to fall back off, so it gets more widely scattered likely into Wednesday morning, and then coverage will pick back up. We'll notice more showers and thunderstorms again on Wednesday. A lot of this is still on the scattered variety again as we go throughout Wednesday, as well as what we're going to see for tomorrow. We'll notice those showers and thunderstorms can carry over Wednesday night into Thursday, and it does look like a lot of these showers and thunderstorms on Thursday will be more into the morning to early afternoon. So if we can get these out of our area by the latter part of the afternoon, we can keep more of that risk for impacts out of our area, hopefully on Thursday, especially in terms of the potential for strong to severe thunderstorms. So it really timing of a frontal passage. So if the front's getting held up to where it's not passing until later in the day, then yes, that severe risk likely returns Thursday. If we could get this to pass in time to where a lot of this precipitation tapers off in the early afternoon, then for us, then that risk for any further impacts Thursday, especially in terms of severe weather, can look lower. So Thursday's a little more uncertainty when it comes to the potential for impacts, especially when we're talking about the potential for some strong severe thunderstorms, but there's a little more certainty over the next couple of days when we're talking about the potential impacts for severe weather. And when we're talking about the potential impacts for severe weather, that risk does look low Tuesday, but it does look to pick back up on Wednesday. So again, Thursday's still a little up in the air with the timing of that precipitation in the front, but Wednesday it does look like the potential's there for some strong to severe thunderstorms. It does look like that risk is staying more isolated. And again, for tomorrow, it does look like it's a low risk overall. So it does look like we're dealing with potentially still some strong thunderstorms, but likely not many, if any, severe thunderstorms for tomorrow. But we can see some in the mix then going into Wednesday. And that is when we're talking about that potential for some strong to severe thunderstorms over the next couple of days. Now, when it comes to that potential for flooding, the excessive rainfall outlook, as you can see for tomorrow, a portion of the region is under marginal and quite a few of us even under a slight risk. So that's when that threat starts to go from localized to a bit more widespread. It's right, more isolated to more scattered in terms of the potential for flooding as we go through tomorrow. And the National Weather Service office in Pittsburgh did note that a flood watch will likely be issued for tomorrow. So we will need to be on high alert for tomorrow, unfortunately, for the potential for more flooding. Yes, the risk for severe weather thankfully looks low, but unfortunately that does not translate to the risk for flooding as well. So we will need to keep a very close eye on those showers and thunderstorms tomorrow. Yes, the progression is much faster, the storm movement much faster than this weekend, but the issue is we're still dealing with heavy downpours. And again, you can get that storm after storm after storm, that training effect of these thunderstorms for tomorrow. So we do have to keep vigilant, unfortunately, when we're dealing with the potential for additional flooding that we can see as we go through tomorrow. So we're going to keep a very close eye. A good day to keep weather aware, have multiple ways to get that warning. If flood warnings were to be issued, have multiple ways to get that warning and be prepared to take action if a flood warning were to be issued. Now, by the time we get into Wednesday, as well as Thursday, thankfully, that excessive rainfall outlook, the risk overall looks to lower a bit, but as you can see, it does not completely lower. So we are still dealing with the potential for more localized flooding into Wednesday and Thursday as well. So the potential is there all next 3 days. But it does look like as we compare the 3 days, going into tomorrow is ultimately going to be a bit of a higher risk with respect to what we're going to see going into Wednesday and Thursday. So when we break down the levels here of excessive rainfall outlook, because we talk about marginal, slight, it can be kind of confusing to what is which, right? Well, you break down the levels, level 1 versus level 2, which again, a lot of us tomorrow's on their level 2, and that's slight, meaning that it's scattered, still mainly localized, but you can start to see, unfortunately, a few more instances of flooding with respect to a marginal risk. And the potential is unfortunately there for even an isolated significant event of flash flooding when it comes to a slight risk. So most vulnerable are urban areas, roads, small streams, and washes. That is with a slight risk. When it's marginal, it's primarily affecting places that can experience rapid runoff. That rain, the intensity is more limited, it's more localized. And those are the categories of excessive rainfall outlook, which goes up to a level 4. It goes from marginal, slight, moderate to high. And you talk about a level 4 for excessive rainfall outlook. That's when the more widespread flash flooding is likely, where lives, property are in greater danger. Areas that don't normally experience flash flooding could. And that's probably, I would say, the bigger highlight would be with a high risk, it's widespread, and areas that don't normally experience flash flooding could. But still, we're dealing with that potential here over the next couple of days for flooding concerns. Again, the higher risk likely coming for what we see for going into tomorrow with respect to going into Wednesday and Thursday. But to sum it up for you for potential impacts, again, thankfully for tomorrow, the severe risk looks to remain at bay, but the flooding risk is present. And again, with respect to the next 3 days, anticipating a little higher risk for flooding Tuesday with respect to Wednesday and Thursday. And again, a flood watch will likely be issued for tomorrow at some point, going throughout either this evening or overnight, or maybe even tomorrow morning for the daytime tomorrow. From Wednesday into Thursday, that's when we have the potential for strong severe thunderstorms, as well as the potential for flooding as we go into Wednesday and Thursday. So those impacts are both potentially there for Wednesday as well as Thursday. So the next 3 days, those are the days to keep weather aware, right? Keep an eye on the sky. Keep vigilant for changing weather conditions. Download the Severe Weather T9 mobile app so you have a way to get those warnings on your phone, and keep an eye on radar and stay vigilant and keep weather aware, as the next 3 days have the potential for impacts for both severe weather and flooding for a lot of the stretch here over the next 3 days. The emphasis for those impacts are certainly in the afternoon and evening hours. The potential is there, but lower for flooding. I think some of that risk can carry over into the overnight hours, but overall, it will be a lower risk overnight, I think, with respect to what we're going to see in the daytime, especially into the afternoon and evening. The severe risk will fall off at night and not be present, but that risk for excessive rainfall could carry over some into the overnight hours, but the emphasis for our impacts will overall be into the afternoon and evening. Austin saying, my biggest question is, what's the current flood level? And Austin may be asking about the Ohio River in terms of the flood level. The thing with river flooding, though, is when it comes to seeing concerns along the Ohio River and flooding, that's when you're dealing with widespread high rainfall amounts. So when you're dealing with these more localized high rainfall amounts, the impact obviously is very great locally, but on a larger scale, it's going to have a much lesser impact for the Ohio River. So when we're talking about Ohio River flooding, we're looking at more widespread high rainfall amounts across the area as a whole. And that then yields concern for flooding along the Ohio River. So we should not be seeing that here with the threat for flooding staying more localized. It should have minimal impacts to the water levels, especially with concerns to flooding along the Ohio River as we extend throughout this week. So this is obviously the unfortunate bad news. The good news is, though, as we look past the next 3 days, there is a pattern change in sight. So we get past the next 3 days, and we keep vigilant, keep weather aware, keep an eye on the sky over the next 3 days. Once we get into Friday, into the weekend, the rain threat will lower. It doesn't completely drop off. There's that slight chance for a pop-up into those days, Friday into the weekend, but overall, it's a much lower risk for rain going into the weekend, and then it does likely fall off completely by the time we get into early next week. But overall, this is a much drier pattern that we are moving into at the end of this work week and going into this weekend that will likely carry over into early next week. And all has to do, Rachel, with that change in that upper air pattern.
That's right, Nate. We're seeing some warm air moving up in the next couple of days, but that's really going to impact us after all this rain passes. So it actually works out pretty good that the rain kind of drops off its possibility of raining on Friday going into the weekend. And then we're seeing all this warm air coming up from the just from south. And as we're going into the weekend, we're going to start to see that dark red circle really start to grow a little bit just near us. And that's finally our 90-degree weather going into next week.
Yeah, the ridge is a welcoming sight, and the heat certainly builds under that ridge. And this is when we'll get that welcoming sight of a drier pattern in place. This is when we can get into to longer stretches of dry weather, and we get into that hot stretch as well. And we'll likely still see that drop in humidity some later this week, especially Friday. But what can happen is that when we see that humidity drop off a little bit, it's going to pick back up probably going into early next week. And we can get to the point where that heat index is a big factor going into early next week, especially when temperatures in the 90s, and we could see those humidity levels reaching to unbearably humid levels. We could get close to 70 plus for a dew point, and that's when you could deal with that heat index value well in the 90s. And, depending on how far those temperatures are climbing into the 90s, maybe even hundreds. So that does come into, heat safety concerns going into early next week is certainly in play. And Rachel, like you mentioned, that heat wave is likely going to be dealing with it as well. The warmest temperature we've had so far for June is 84 degrees at the Wheeling, Ohio County Airport. And what a change we're likely going to see here in just a matter of a week, as those temperatures are really ramping up likely by this weekend and early next week. And this is great poolside weather as well. Certainly by the time we get into the weekend and early next week, as we'll deal with quite a bit of sunshine breaking out as those temperatures are ramping up.
Yeah, probably one of the first weekends it hasn't rained in a long time.
Yeah, that's true too. That's true too. Austin was asking about that, and we had 9. It was 9 out of the past 13 this weekend, made 10 out of the past 14 of the weekends have had measurable precipitation at the Wheeling, Ohio County Airport. So yeah, that's a good point too, is that we get to that dry weekend returning across the Ohio Valley for this weekend likely. Also saying, I'm happy to see a drier pattern this upcoming week, but not excited to see us going up to the 90s. Yeah, it's going to certainly get hot, and not just for a day or two, but probably for several days there as temperatures are ramping up. So the weather, again, does thankfully look to turn much more quiet. I mean, like I mentioned, we'll have to watch. Obviously, there's some heat safety concerns with that excessive heat going into early next week, but certainly nice to see a quiet pattern. And, in terms of the precipitation, thankfully getting into a much lower chance of rain by Friday that will likely carry over into early next week, maybe even going through middle of next week. We could see some chances of showers and thunderstorms returning, I think, later going on into next week. But at least here near term, we still have to keep weather aware, keep vigilant the next 3 days. Again, have multiple ways to get those warnings if one were to be issued. The potential for flooding is there all 3 days, next 3 days. The potential for severe weather is more concentrated Wednesday and possibly Thursday. There's still some uncertainty on the severe risk Thursday, but certainly watch for it on Wednesday for the potential for strong severe thunderstorms. The flooding risk, I think, overall the next 3 days is likely more localized, though there is a possibility for tomorrow for it to be less localized and more scattered, so we could deal with a few instances of flooding, unfortunately, across the Ohio Valley. And that being said, we will likely have a flood watch issued for our area for tomorrow. So tomorrow could ultimately be a little higher risk for flooding with respect to the next 3 days. But I'd say, with that potential there the next 3 days, certainly, I would say almost treat all three the same in that regard, because that potential, I think, is there all 3 days, and certainly keep weather aware over the next 3 days. And then once we get past that, again, thankfully, we can look forward to a quieter stretch of weather for the weekend. And the impacts at that point would be more for excessive heat and the heat safety concerns for early next week. That would be more of the impact at that point, likely by Friday, looking ahead into next week. All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for tuning in to this edition of Nate at 8. Again, we'll keep weather aware over the next 3 days. And then once, like you mentioned, really summer begins later this week on I believe it's Thursday is our date here. Let me check for certain, but I believe it's, let's see, the 20th is, no, the 20th is Friday. I'm mistaken. The 20th is Friday. So ironically, right as summer starts, those temperatures are ramping up this weekend. So it's right on time. It's right on cue, isn't it? Yeah, and it worked out earlier this month too. It's from May to June. We had that cool, wet into May, and then it turned warmer June, and now, once summer is officially here, now it's hot. Now it's hot. It's unbelievable. Our warmest temperature so far for this year was back in April at 86 degrees, and we've since then 84 has been the warmest temp, but not for much longer.
No, not for much longer. Yeah. It's a warm welcome, I guess, to summer and the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly looking forward to that quiet stretch of weather. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in. You can catch us for the latest coming up on News 9 at 10 on Fox 9, News 9 tonight, 11, and of course, for that next edition of Nate at 8 tomorrow evening at 8 o'clock. I hope everyone has a wonderful night. Again, thoughts and prayers go out to those affected by the flooding over this past weekend in Ohio County. I wish all of those, continue recovery efforts and just heartbreaking events. And certainly our heart breaks for those that have been impacted over this past weekend in Ohio County. Again, keep vigilant the next 3 days, and then thankfully much quieter patterns in place into next week. Have a good night, everyone. We'll see you on the next edition of Nate at 8.